Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's now 2:45 Eastern Time, and again, I want to apologize for the technical difficulties we experienced earlier today, but thanks for coming back to join us. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's online session, which is entitled Motor Pool for Utility Fleets. For those of you that may never have joined us in one of these webinars before, this session is really designed as a forum to help us educate the fleet community and share a bit of information regarding industry best practices. Today we'll be discussing an important topic that's particularly relevant during periods of budget constraints and as staff slowly return to work by focusing on how fleets can dramatically improve vehicle productivity through motor pool management, specifically for utility fleets. As a way of introduction, my name is Ron Katz, and I'm Senior Director of National Accounts for Agile Fleet. Excuse me, we're a software company based in Chantilly, Virginia. And today I'm really pleased to be joined by Michael Farley, who operates a really effective fleet at Basin Electric Power Cooperative in Bismarck, North Dakota. Michael and I are going to split up today's presentation. He's going to start the session by sharing just a bit of real-world experience and some of the challenges that he faced when he assumed responsibility of the BEPC fleet. He'll take a few minutes and describe some of the challenges that he faced, and then describe a few of the real-world improvements that have been accomplished by automating BEPC's vehicle management practices. I'll then look to build on Michael's message by discussing how each of you might write sort of your own success story and benefit from some of the tools and approaches that were implemented and adopted by Basin Electric Power Cooperative. Oh, and before we get started, I wanted to let you know that we'll be recording today's session, and we'll certainly make this content available to each of you in the days ahead. So feel free to really just sit back, relax, and if you have any questions, just enter them into the chat function, and we'll be sure to address them as we move through the session or, at the end during the Q&A session. Okay, with that little bit of background complete, what I'd like to do now is turn the microphone over to Michael.
Well, thank you, Ron. Good afternoon, everybody. Basin Electric Power Cooperative, headquartered here in Bismarck, North Dakota, where yesterday it was 65 degrees and sunny. We're a consumer-owned cooperative. We have 131 member systems, and we serve 9 states with a wide variety of power generation and transmission, from North Dakota and Montana all the way down through New Mexico, and then into Iowa and Nebraska and parts of Minnesota as well. In my fleet, I have over 1,200 units. That's from my smallest lawnmower to my largest piece of earth-moving equipment. And those 1,200 units are spread out over 23 different fleet locations. We have 4 coal-fired generation plants and a what's called a synfuels plant, where we convert lignite coal into synthetic natural gas. Those 5 sites contain most of our fleet. And we also have a motor pool here at our headquarters location that's primarily for administrative travel. And we have a DOT fleet of about 120 units in our transmission division, and they maintain our 2,500-mile high-voltage transmission line network, again, that extends from North Dakota down into South Dakota, Minnesota, over to Montana, down through Wyoming into Colorado and Nebraska. So I took over fleet in the summer of 2017, and at that time, Fleet Commander had been in place for, I believe, about 6 months. But when Fleet Commander was implemented here at Basin, we were managing our fleet very manually. We did not have any kind of automated reservation process. We had an administrative assistant who was keeping track of reservations with an Outlook calendar and email reservations. We had keys in a parts bin that she would hand out, and people would return. People would report their mileage manually on a trip sheet or through a P-card program that had vehicle receipts for gas, and just not a really cobbled together system. The ability to get metrics was almost non-existent on how much fuel we were burning. We could do manual calculations and things of that nature. How much trips were costing, how long trips were. Information was very difficult to come across. And so as a result, we were not making informed decisions when it came to purchases. Our purchases were one person who was running motor pool, just buying an arbitrary number of vehicles every year. If a vehicle was wrecked or suffered catastrophic failure, it would just be sidelined. And no real data existed to see, was that the right number of units? Were these the right type of units? Were these the proper mix of what units were being requested? And no long-term planning, because we didn't have the data to support what we were doing. We also had within our cooperative an excessive use of assigned and personal use vehicles. We had somewhere between 60 to 70 units that were assigned to a specific individual. And that we had, I think, about a dozen of them here at headquarters. We had a number of them at each of the plant locations as well. So that was a program that was pretty loose and not accounted for very well at all. So these are the things we wanted. We wanted to be able to look at our fleet in real time and look at any given day and see, well, what's our mileage for the year? What's our mileage by vehicle, mileage by state? How much fuel are we buying for each of these vehicles? What are our maintenance costs? And create a proactive culture. How can we get the data that we need so we can make informed decisions today, but also inform our decisions tomorrow, next week, next year, and reduce all of the manual processes that were going on. We had way too much manpower. And finally, to look at inefficient employee behavior, vehicles that were returning the next morning, vehicles that were returning next Monday, things like that, reducing our personal use, and trying to find, you know, what's really the right size for our motor pool here at our headquarters location. So Fleet Commander was brought in, like I said, right around the first of the year in 2017. And it's great. We have an intranet system that everybody logs into every morning at headquarters. And the link to Fleet Commander is right there on our intranet. They don't have to log in a second time. It's a single sign-on application. So people can go right in and they can make a reservation within, I think it's, 30 to 60 seconds. It's a very, very quick process from our intranet. We do that at 3 of our locations now. We do it here at headquarters, and we also do it at 2 of our plant facilities where the vehicles that run outside the fence are in the reservation system for people to reserve as they need. Here at headquarters, we also installed the kiosk. We have the large, I think it's 56 slots. I think it was the biggest one we could get at the time. And that has card key access, so people can come into the building 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, using their card keys. They can log into the system and they can get their fleet keys. People oftentimes leave at 4 or 5 in the morning, and it's a much more efficient system than giving them the keys the night before, which takes the vehicle out of service the night before, so on and so forth. We know, we have a clear visibility of fleet status. One of the screens that Fleet Commander offers us is a grid that shows our fleet reservations on an hourly or a daily basis, and it's an incredible tool. I use it multiple times a day to see exactly where my fleet is going and when things will be back, when things are leaving, and helps me to plan my maintenance too, because I can see when vehicles have downtime very easily. It's also a great screen to move vehicles around. And we can change the way that vehicles are assigned. This is something that we almost never could have done under manual operation. But in the summertime, when all of our vehicles are operating, we want to put miles on a vehicle because we know it's going to be retired, we can run that vehicle out first, or a vehicle that's being underutilized. And then in the wintertime, we have some pretty cold winters up here in North Dakota, if you'll believe it. I like to use the last out, or the last in, first out, or the first in, first out system. So the vehicle that's been sitting the longest is the next one to go. And that has helped me with jump starts, battery life, by making sure that every one of the vehicles is rotated out periodically, so all of them are getting used over the winter months and continuing to stay warm and stay functioning. And it's given us a tremendous amount of data. We have in integration into Fleet Commander from our HR, our employee management system. So when a new employee is hired, all their employee information, their department information, that all goes into Fleet Commander automatically. And we can track usage by employee, we can track it by department, or we can even track it by what's called Home Center, which is the accounting number that each employee carries. And we can see the use by accounting divisions as well. And finally, the ability to communicate policy changes is really good. We have an annual renewal on our policy that everybody, you know, when they sign into Fleet Commander, they're asked to look over the policy and agree that they've read it. If we have any changes, we have any updates, we can go in, we can zero that out, and everybody gets that when they log into the system next. So confirmation emails work great, not only for the employees, but for me. I see all those and they go into a separate email folder, so I can go see them and make sure that all of that information has gotten to our employees as well. So here at our headquarters location, in the 4.5 years, I've had a maximum of 27 units in my motor pool, and I'm currently at 17. And I've been at 17 for over 2 years now. And so it's really allowed us to reduce the number of vehicles that we carry. We have taken some of those vehicles that still had some life in them and send them to one of our plant sites. We've been able to retire older units that have been hanging on well past their expected life. And so we're not buying as many vehicles as we used to. We're probably saving, 2-3 vehicle purchases per year just in our motor pool here at headquarters. All the data that Fleet Commander has provided for us, we've been able to now project our purchases out 6 years. We know what we're going to purchase for the next 6 years. We have an expectancy of usage for every year, so we can project when a vehicle is going to hit a mileage threshold or an age threshold, and where we feel like we don't want that vehicle out on the highway any longer, and we can put that into a more localized service, or we can send it off to one of our plant locations. And finally, eliminating our assigned and personal use vehicles. We went from 63 is the number here. I actually came across a couple more since I put this slide together, but we're currently at 16. So we've reduced that, 75%, 75-80% by saying, hey, this vehicle still belongs to you, but we're going to put it in the box. Just check it out when you need it. And then we had some history to say, look, we can get this done very easily with, putting this in motor pool and you checking motor pool out when you need it. So we've drastically reduced our personal use. Consequently, our gas that was going to personal use, the wear and tear on vehicles, people buying tires, all those things that they were getting as a personal use benefit are now benefiting the cooperative as a whole through our motor pool.
Michael, thanks so much. Really, to help us sort of better understand the journey that you went through over the past 4 or 5 years. And really how you're more effectively sort of managing the fleet today through information rather than, I guess we'd say, sort of instinct. Now I'd like to spend a bit of time covering a few topics that'll hopefully leave you all with just a little better understanding about how sharing vehicles might benefit, you, your team, and your organization. I'll review a few practical bits of information about vehicle utilization and sort of how to get your arms around that elusive metric. Then I'll spend just a moment discussing sort of the elephant in the room, which is the impact the pandemic has had on fleet operations. Then I'll use sort of that background to highlight just a few of the benefits of automated motor pools. And lastly, I'll review how technology can be used to streamline process and help drive some ongoing operational efficiencies. So I'd really like to sort of start my portion of today's session by pausing to consider the role that really fleet plays within your company. I mean, obviously, without vehicles, your organization would have a really hard time delivering the needed services to your internal customers as well as to the ratepayers, right? So with this underlying mission, really the role of fleet and your role as a fleet manager is to ensure that the organization has, the proper mix of equipment to effectively deliver its services, and then manage these assets as efficiently as possible to make sure that you have the right type of assets available when and where they're needed. Really no secret there. I think you guys all live this day in, day out, week in, week out. However, really the business of fleet over time has become, increasingly complex. And it's really made even more so today by the river of data that seems to flood our inbox, our spreadsheets and our phone lines really every day. Sometimes it can be difficult to access really the fundamental metrics that highlight the efficiency and the effectiveness of your operation. Like BEPC before Michael implemented, or sort of got involved, if you will, with Fleet Commander, you may not have a local system in place that really helps you easily understand the daily fleet usage, of your equipment. Your organization may not have a clear and concise set of policies regarding the acquisition, the use, and the disposal of the fleet, right? You may have equipment and inventory that's been used to serve what used to be a valid purpose, but the mission of the specific line of business or the department may have changed over time. Perhaps you have departments that want to keep a few vehicles really just in case they need them at some point, right? We all run into that. Well, what can often be the case, the fleet budget really has been based on historical trends rather than sort of a forward-looking needs of the organization in the future. But no matter the reason, without a clear and easy to understand set of metrics, it's really hard to figure out if your fleet utilization is in line with industry standards in trends, really, or not. The key to understanding utilization is really being able to easily identify the composition, the makeup of your fleet, and describe it in discrete, supportable numbers. So if you look at these two images, you or your supervisor might draw two completely different conclusions about this fleet. But if you had to sort of share a story about the equipment sitting in the parking lot with your management and potentially seek funding for additional vehicles or convince a department to give up what might be an underused vehicle, as Michael had to do, you'd find it can be a challenge, really. Both these situations might be correct during certain times of the year or based upon a particular department's need. But either way, it's often the case that you'll have a hard time convincing your management about a reasonable plan without accurate and meaningful metrics. So utilization metrics are really a critical component to making informed, fact-based decisions to drive change. So what's a meaningful utilization metric? Well, in our experience, there's really not a single numerical value that works for every fleet, right? But over the years, it's pretty clear because the only thing that's consistent, whether you're a big fleet, small fleet, utility fleet, or something else, the only thing that's really consistent in this business is that everybody calls it, fleet. So if you look at this really simple formula, most fleets, need to understand how many vehicles they operate. That's the capacity of the fleet, right? And then how many vehicles they need to support the mission, on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour basis, well, that's the demand. So in this case, if this fleet operates 10 vehicles and they only have 5 of them that are being used on a regular basis, well, obviously, that's 50% utilization. However, when you look at utilization, there can obviously be a variety of things that making kind of using that really simple formula difficult, right? Because you could have equipment that's out for repair, right? Or you may need to augment your fleet with, outside rentals, whether it's from Global or Nesco or Enterprise if they're light duty vehicles. Or perhaps you need to allow selected staff to use their personal vehicles, as Michael had a situation where there was a lot of personal use being used. So they had their personal vehicle being used for business purposes. It's really entirely possible that you may have a situation where you actually have insufficient vehicles to meet the daily needs of the fleet. So utilization is certainly not something that's a static attribute. It's constantly evolving and changing over time. The important thing to think about is really any metric that you consider to help you better sort of understand how and why your fleet is being used can be used to help drive meaningful savings. Many of you probably have metrics in place that reflect vehicle usage based on some standard value to justify that a driver or department has an assigned vehicle. This is sort of the policy, for instance, that Michael was speaking to. So, in this particular fleet, maybe there's a minimum mandatory monthly mileage of 800 miles. Obviously, if a driver in this case travels more than that, in this case 950 miles, well, their usage is running, about 120%. The bottom line is, with a few key operating metrics, really as an organization, as a fleet, it's really way better off than if you weren't using any benchmarks at all. And by having some technology in place that can help consolidate and render this information quickly and efficiently, well, there's some opportunities there. Well, if you take a step back then and say, okay, well, today, where are we? Well, clearly, there aren't any of us that haven't been impacted by the global pandemic, right, in some way, shape, or form over the past 45 months, year and a half. Whether personally, professionally, our world has changed, obviously, in dramatic ways that probably will take years and years for us to really fully understand. Here at Agile, we get to deal with fleets of all shapes and sizes. And among many of the tools that our technology enables, one of the more powerful components is really reporting that tracks day-by-day usage of the fleet. So if we look at some sample data from a typical utility fleet for their light-duty, equipment, you'll see what's become really a predictable trend regarding equipment utilization over the past 20 months or so. If you look at this graph, the blue line represents the daily fleet usage since March of 2019, and the orange line represents the change in fleet usage that began with the start of the pandemic. Obviously, it fell off a cliff. So what jumps off the page is that when the pandemic did hit, this particular fleet's daily utilization dropped by about 80%. So now it's really something closer to 35% usage, day by day, hour by hour. So I bet in parts of your fleet, you've experienced really a similar drop in fleet usage. I'm mentioning utilization in this context as I really want to just highlight the financial impact that this change in utilization represents. So even though this is a pretty small fleet, it's only 100 to 135 light-duty vehicles. At a 35% utilization rate, the daily cost for these idle vehicles is approximately $1,000 a day for the vehicles that are just sitting outside in the parking lot. This $1,000 a day estimate is actually pretty conservative when considering all of the costs of operating a vehicle for this relatively small portion of the fleet. With many of your staff now slowly returning to the office, we're finding that this trend is gradually changing, right? So if this representative fleet does nothing for the ensuing months, right, from now till whenever, these losses will continue to accumulate over time. And this recurring cost will balloon until really some kind of change is made. So at what point does a fleet manager decide to address the issue and make some hard decisions and implement the necessary changes to really offset this escalating cost with some kind of plan? Interestingly, during the pandemic, we're finding that lots of organizations have been using sort of the downtime while the staff are working remotely to take a look and calculate the actual cost of idle vehicles, as well as the potential savings they could garner by moving vehicles into a shared pool or perhaps even disposing of underutilized vehicles while the value of used vehicles is so high. We've helped to make some of these types of calculations really easy by developing an online, what we call a fleet waste calculator, that you can use to assess what the costs are for these standing vehicles. And you can actually access it right on our website. It's right on our homepage. There's no cost. But basically, with this simple tool, you can quickly calculate, the carrying cost, really, of any type of fleet or group of assets whether they're light duty, heavy duty, vocational, it really doesn't matter, and instantly determine what these idle vehicles will continue to cost if nothing else changes. So, with that background, how can implementing an automated motor pool or equipment sharing system help you out? Well, as Michael and I have been discussing throughout sort of this presentation, reductions in operating budgets have really become the norm, right? So delivering efficiencies and savings is no longer something that a fleet manager can sort of aspire to. It's really become sort of a mandate for survival. The benefits of implementing an automated sharing system are pretty straightforward. By limiting the number of departmental or individually assigned vehicles, as Michael specifically stated, and moving just some of these vehicles into a shared pool, fleets can rapidly make these shared vehicles available to a much larger community of users, dramatically reducing the idle vehicle carrying costs. With real-time visibility over demand of the vehicles versus the capacity and the types of vehicles in the pool, utility fleets can optimize the mix and types of equipment within the pool, oftentimes cleaner, newer, and safer vehicles to the user community. That helps drive more interest in the pool and improve customer service. By automating a reservation process, as well as the approval and key management practices, again, as Michael referred to, utility fleets can dramatically reduce the burden on fleet staff, making vehicles available off hours, so people don't have to come in and hand out the keys, as an example. With that integrated key control, you can give access 24/7, 365, while tracking the custody of the keys, who took them, when they returned them, etc. And then lastly, with an automated equipment sharing solution in place, fleets can gain access to instant kind of real-time utilization and performance metrics, allowing fleet managers to turn insights into action and really more effectively manage the fleet. So, how does an automated motor pool system work? Well, it really starts by being able to streamline all of the processes here. I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but it's really about enabling an easy way to go online and schedule and coordinate the use of the vehicles. As Michael said, people can go onto their intranet, click one button, log in, and actually access a vehicle in 60 seconds. Then it's automating or streamlining the dispatch, the handing out of keys, and the management of the pickup and return of vehicles in an automated and secure fashion, and communicating company policies. And then lastly, really the reason why you go through the hassle of implementing technology is to give you analytics, give you benchmarks, give you reporting, so that you can more easily view the activity, the productivity of your fleet. And the way this works is really pretty simple. In BEPC's case, they have access to a completely configured website, if you will, where a user can go online and basically select, where do they want to check the vehicle out. So whether it was at headquarters or one of the other facilities at BEPC, they could pick that facility. They click next, and then they fill in just some basic information on a reservation form. And this form is configurable. It's user definable. So we can capture just the right amount of information to support your business needs. But basically, that's it. The driver, the user, just fills in some basic information about when they want to pick the vehicle up, when they want to return it, perhaps selecting the vehicle type. And when they're done, they click next, and the system sends them an auto-generated email that confirms that that reservation has been completed. At the back end, as Michael referred to, it's really about creating a user experience that's easy and intuitive, that's configured by the individual line of business or location where these vehicles are assigned. With that background and capturing the right information, we can then give people like Michael and his team visibility over the activity of the fleet, using dashboards that come in a variety of configurations within the application. But basically, you can view the vehicles that are departing, the vehicles that are coming back, the composition of the fleet. You can even look at real-time demand versus capacity, where you're looking at the actual capacity of the available shared vehicles versus the hour-by-hour usage of those vehicles. The system presents users with hyperlinks that shows them when vehicles might be late for pickup, vehicles are late for return, requests are canceled, etc. The system can even consolidate and pull together automatically sort of customer satisfaction information. This is really what what an automated vehicle solution should do for a fleet. Then from a user perspective, the way that people can gain access to vehicles is by using, really an integrated key management solution. And that experience, is really to take what used to be kind of a manual, labor-intensive process where someone would walk up to a counter and say, I'm here and I need to check out the vehicle, and making it really an automated process that can provide secure control over the keys 24/7, again, 365. And the way that process works is by supporting access to keys, with a key box that's sized and shaped based upon the particular needs of the fleet. So Michael said, he's got a big box with 56 keys. Some organizations may have a pool that's a dozen vehicles, in which case you can get a much smaller key box. But from a user experience, they basically get the opportunity to walk up to a kiosk and effectively log in and get the keys, much like they would when they're picking up vehicle or boarding passes at the airport. So we do this with sort of a touchscreen kiosk experience. So a user walks up, puts their finger on the screen that says, I'm here, I want to check out the vehicle. They log in with a username and password, or perhaps swipe their employee ID across an RFID reader, which then logs them into the system. They're then presented with their confirmation. They basically say, yep, that's the one I'm supposed to get. At which point, they're presented with a screen that says, okay, this is the vehicle that you're getting. Its license plate number is 1KR3340. That's the fuel level. It's parked in parking space G7. They click the little checkout button, and the kiosk now communicates with the key box, and the user sees on the screen a little countdown from 60 seconds and tells them your key is in slot number 12, at which point they open up the key box. Slot 12, key 12, has a little LED light next to it, so they can take the appropriate key. All of the rest of the keys are secure, of course, so they can't take those keys out. And that's it, they're done. They go off, they drive the vehicle, and when it's time to return, they sort of reverse the process by putting their finger on the screen that says, I want to check the vehicle in. They bring up their confirmation. We can present the user with some information about kind of policies. Make sure you bring the vehicle back with a full tank of gas or clean or whatever the policies might be. At which point, typically our clients ask their users to provide some information, such as where did they park the vehicle, maybe fuel level. Obviously, because we're fleet people and we need to manage odometers and preventive maintenance scheduling and things like that, we want to make sure we get a valid odometer, so the system is going to make sure that it's a proper odometer value that's being loaded into the system. A lot of our clients want to capture information from a user about their experience with the vehicle, or if there's something wrong, provide them an opportunity to let the fleet people know that something needs to be addressed, at which point they can just type this into the screen. For those organizations that have GPS, we can actually leverage GPS to update the odometer value in the system automatically and effectively eliminate any opportunity for a driver to key the wrong bits of data into the system. At the end of the day, once we've captured some basic information when they return the vehicle, they basically put the key back in the box and they're done. And the whole cool thing about this process is it's completely automated so that it takes a lot of manual process out while enforcing rigor around policies and controls having to do with what your vehicle sharing or equipment sharing philosophy is. But one of the things that we found with the utility clients that we work with is not only is there a great opportunity to automate process using this type of technology for light-duty vehicles, but this also can be leveraged to provide access to vocational equipment or specialty equipment that might be high-value, underutilized equipment. And we do that using something we call grab and go, whereby those people with the appropriate authority, they've got the right certification, they basically can log in by clicking grab and go, and then they're presented with images of the types of vehicles that they're allowed to check out based upon their profile. So if they have a CDL and they're allowed to take out a digger derrick, well, they'd be presented with a digger derrick. And you basically put your finger on the image of the type of equipment that you want to check out. And then the system presents them with a little screen that says, okay, I know when you're checking the vehicle out because I'm standing in front of the kiosk, but I probably want to know when are you going to bring it back. Maybe you want to capture some other information, but basically we present the user with the appropriate fields they need to fill in. They click continue. They take They get presented with the screen that shows them what vehicle they're getting. They take the key and they go. And this whole process supports that reservation capability in about 25 seconds, while enforcing rigor and policy, and oversight into your policy and controls about managing the fleet. So the whole goal here is to make it really easy and intuitive for people to access vehicles when and where they're needed. So one of the primary reasons why an organization, as I said, sort of goes through the hassle of buying and implementing fleet technology, whether it's vehicle sharing technology or anything else, it's really about streamlining what can often be time-consuming, labor-intensive process, while also giving you the tools you need to generate actionable intelligence through reporting so that you can proactively drive change. So another example on how technology can be leveraged to make life easier within a fleet environment, and this is something that Michael referred to as well, has to do with managing assigned vehicles and mileage reporting. Okay, so for many of the utilities that we work with, they have a real challenge collecting mileage from vehicles that are either assigned to a department or assigned to a driver. So you can take this technology and use it to help streamline this process by really having a flexible tool set to automate the mileage collection process, right? And allow staff and drivers with these assigned vehicles to more easily report their daily, monthly usage using kind of an online mileage collection tool. The tools really allow an organization to collect whether it be trip details, usage details, perhaps crew details, even month-end mileage expense details, while an integrated sort of email tool set allows fleet staff to more easily send reminder emails and effectively chase those people that haven't reported their mileage on a timely basis. So the process really begins with rendering what would be a flexible form that can be structured to capture really only the details that are needed to support the particular organization's mileage collection needs. In this case, a user simply selects whether the trip is personal or business, updates the ending mileage, because the beginning mileage is actually automatically rendered from the last mileage reading. If there's a need to collect additional details regarding how or why the vehicle was used, any additional comments, these adaptable forms can be configured to capture, again, only the information that's important to the fleet. Of course, all relevant details that are input by the user, they're captured and maintained by the system, and they're available for comprehensive reporting. And then lastly, there's an integrated email creation tool that allows fleet staff to easily kind of run a routine where they can select, what duration they'd like to generate, an email distribution list for, so to speak. Then you just sort of type in the message you want to, include in the body of the email, and then you click send, and the system generates a mail merge distribution to only the drivers that haven't reported their mileage in the last, X number of days. And then the driver gets an email with a little hyperlink, and when they click the hyperlink, it brings them back to that mileage collection form so they can update the system automatically. At the end of the day, really the goal for this type of technology is to help, as I said earlier, streamline process and drive efficiencies while giving you sort of enhanced services to, your user community. So in summary, really, during these sort of difficult times, when utility fleets are really being buffeted by uncertainty and continually pressured to find cost savings, one of the most effective ways to gain some semblance of control is to focus on areas that you can define and then change. By concentrating on developing sort of meaningful utilization metrics, you can ensure that you only operate the right types and the right quantity of equipment that's needed and begin to deploy them so they're available really when and where they're needed. With accurate and timely utilization data, you can begin to optimize the composition of the fleet to reflect the current and future needs of the organization as you continue to come out of the pandemic and potentially reduce or redeploy underutilized equipment. With an automated motor pool system in place, you can eliminate labor-intensive process, all while reducing costs and improving customer satisfaction. And with systemized reporting, you can make it easier for staff to report monthly mileage and mandatory usage data. Sort of remember, you're not alone. You know, Agile has dozens of similar utility fleets just like yours, including Michael's and his operation in North Dakota using this type of technology. If you have questions or you'd like to speak to, you know, like-minded fleet professionals that have successfully implemented some of the suggestions that we've described today, just let us know and we can kind of put you in touch. Now I'd like to take a few minutes to respond to any questions that came in during the presentation. And as we do, keep in mind, you know, that we have loads of resources available on our website. You know, they range from thought-provoking white papers, such as the one shown here. We've got that fleet waste calculator I mentioned earlier, to client case studies and tools to help develop internal business cases for implementing vehicle sharing technology. You know, if you prefer sort of a more personal touch, feel free to reach out to me or any of my colleagues here at Agile, and we can assist you with a personal fleet savings assessment, a one-on-one demonstration of Fleet Commander, sort of and a whole lot more. So I know we had a couple of questions come in right before the session, and we sort of ran into a bind earlier today. So I thought I'd answer those first, or address those first, and then open it up, I suppose, if people want to shout out a question, or feel free to type something in the chat box. One question that came in beforehand was, have fleets use this technology to share vocational equipment in addition to just passenger and light duty vehicles? And I know I talked to that just a little bit during the presentation. We've had quite a bit of success with utility fleets that have used this to share line equipment, right? Digger derricks. We've got quite a few gas utility companies that have, you know, excessive amounts of backhoes that, you know, oftentimes can be underutilized. So really any asset, it could be a chainsaw for that matter, you know, can be managed or shared, if you will, using the same process, right? Another question, and I asked this of Michael, but Fleet Commander was installed before he came on board, but there was a question about how long does it take to install this technology? And of course, that's somewhat of an open-ended question, depends on your fleet, but a typical implementation for us, depending if it's just software or software and key control hardware, is between 30, usually in 90 days, is how long it takes to stand this up. So it's significantly easier, quicker, and more efficient than a typical fleet management information system implementation if you've lived through one of those before. That was the two questions that I had. Are there any other questions? I'm just going to open up the chat function here again and see if something comes in. Michael, is there anything else you'd like to add as we wind down here?
No, I don't believe so.
Well, gosh, Michael, I'd like to thank you again for your time and participation today. I hope you all found this interesting. As I mentioned when we started, we have recorded this session and we will be sending this out along with a little thank you note in the next day or so. In the meantime, I wish all of you a great rest of the day and certainly a wonderful holiday season as we turn into December here. Thanks for joining us and take good care.